Hey, it's Ron, and I want to tell you a story about business and how that story changed everything. He'd been up since before dawn, same as every day. Bakers didn't get mornings off, not even on execution days. He'd carried the first loaves out to the front of the shop while the ovens were still cooling, and he already knew what the city felt like. Paris wasn't buzzing. It felt tightened. Prices, tempers, nerves, everything wound itself into a knot. And today, the knot was pulling the entire city toward the same place. By mid-morning, he was pressed into the crowd moving toward the square. Not because he cared about the spectacle, he cared about what came after it. Flour shortages, price surges, rationing riots, he'd seen all of them up close. The king's decisions had filtered down to every sack of grain his master tried to buy. Taxes, debts, war, corruption. Every political argument ended at the same place for him: the cost of bread. When he reached the square, he could barely see the platform, but he could hear the murmurs. The man being led up the steps wasn't a symbol to him. He was the person whose government had spent money it didn't have, borrowed from leaders it couldn't repay, and pushed the economy to collapse. The apprentice didn't need speeches to explain what had gone wrong. He'd lived the shortages, the queues, the angry customers, the days when the bakery simply couldn't open. A nation doesn't execute a king because it wakes up angry. It executes a king because the system underneath him breaks. He watched as the blade rose. The crowd held its breath. And the apprentice realized that whatever happened next, France had just severed more than a monarchy. It had severed the economic reign of King Louis XVI. But how does a bakery apprentice end up understanding the collapse of a nation better than the men in powdered wigs? Why does an execution scene make more economic sense than political sense when the entire system has already failed? And on January 21st, 1793, how did the fall of King Louis XVI signal that France wasn't just changing rulers, it was resetting its entire economic order? From Business Basics, I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the daily podcast where we explain the stories that changed business forever. Every date of the year has a story where business reshaped the world. Today, January 21st, that story takes us to 1793, when monarchy met market reality. Long before the scaffolding was built, France's economy was already collapsing under its own weight. For decades, the monarchy had spent more money than it collected, financing wars, maintaining palaces, and propping up a court system that consumed wealth faster than it generated it. The country wasn't short on talent or labor. It was short on cash and credit and credibility. Louis XVI didn't create the problem, but he inherited every piece of it. The French tax structure was a mess. The wealthy and the clergy paid very little. The poor paid the most. And as the state fell deeper into debt, the burden shifted onto the people least able to absorb it. Bread prices rose, wages stagnated, and unfortunately harvests failed. And every time the crown tried to reform the system, the privileged classes blocked it to protect their exemptions. By the late 1780s, France wasn't simply experiencing hardship. It was experiencing a fiscal crisis so deep that international lenders stopped offering favorable terms and sometimes stopped offering lending completely. When a government loses access to credit, everything else follows. Markets tighten. Supplies contract. Unemployment rises and public trust erodes. For ordinary people, including that baker's apprentice who watched it all unfold, the effects were immediate. Bread wasn't an abstract symbol. It was dinner. Louis XVI tried to stabilize the system. He brought in financial advisors. He approved reforms that arrived too late and pushed too slowly. So the numbers kept sliding and the crowds kept swelling. A country with a collapsing fiscal engine needed answers, and the monarchy no longer had them. When the revolution erupted, it wasn't just a political uprising. It was the response of a population living inside a broken economic model. And for all the debates happening in Paris, the simplest truth was the one every baker understood. When the price of essentials spiral out of reach, governments fall. Once the monarchy was dismantled, France didn't instantly become stable. In fact, the first years of the revolution created a new economic turmoil. Old systems were gone, but new ones hadn't been built yet. Property seized from the church and the nobility flooded the market, and inflation surged as paper money replaced metal currency, undermining confidence in every transaction. But beneath the chaos, something fundamental shifted. The economy no longer belonged to a king. France was redefining who controlled property, who could work, who could vote, and who could participate in the new marketplace. Abolishing feudal dues freed millions of peasants from obligations that had tied them to landowners for centuries. Eliminating tax exemptions forced the privileged classes to finally participate in the nation's finances. And the sale of nationalized property redistributed economic power across a much wider base. The execution of Louis XVI wasn't just a political statement. It was the moment the revolution committed fully to economic restructuring. A monarchy could not coexist with a market that demanded transparency, taxation, and accountability. Removing the king removed the financial system that protected him. For people like the baker apprentice, the turning point was immediate. Grain markets began operating under different rules. Price controls came and went, new taxes replaced old ones. The state was trying, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, to build an economy that belonged to citizens instead of a royal household. And the revolution didn't solve every problem. It didn't erase hunger or debt or instability, but it broke the model that had made economic reform impossible. And once that barrier fell, France began the long, uneven process of rebuilding a system where the market mattered as much as the throne once had.
Obtén tu diploma de secundaria por ti y por tu familia. Visita completatudiploma.org para encontrar centros educativos gratuitos cerca de ti. Presentado por Dollar General Literacy Foundation y The Ad Council.
In the decades that followed, France didn't just rebuild its economy. It reinvented the relationship between a government and the marketplace. The fall of the monarchy forced the country to answer questions it had avoided for generations. Who owns property? Who pays taxes? Who controls labor? And who does an economy actually serve? The answers to those questions built the modern state. France created a tax system based on ability to pay, not privilege. It standardized weights, measures, and commercial rules so markets could function without royal charters. It established civil codes that put contracts, property rights, and business disputes under law instead of noble authority. It built national institutions that outlived every government that tried to run them. And it defined something radical for the era, an economy accountable to citizens, not to the crown. Other nations watched. Some adopted the ideas deliberately, and others absorbed them slowly, but the effect spread far beyond France. Modern taxation, modern contract law, modern commercial courts, and modern labor mobility all trace pieces of their structure back to the post-revolution reforms. The political drama gets the attention. The economic infrastructure is what actually endured. For a baker's apprentice in that crowd, none of this would have been visible. Bread still rose or fell with the harvest, prices still hurt, stability came in fits and starts, but the foundation beneath his world had changed. The economy he would grow old in wasn't the one he was born into. Because on that winter morning in Paris, the guillotine didn't just end a reign, It ended an economic model that couldn't survive its own imbalance, and the long rebuilding of a new system, one built on markets instead of monarchs, began on January 21st, 1793, the day King Louis XVI of France was executed. I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the podcast that finds the turning points behind the headlines. To hear more stories like this, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And if you're enjoying the stories, please do not forget to subscribe and maybe leave us a quick review. It helps more people find the story behind the business. And if you want to actually understand business without the fluff, the buzzwords, or the MBA language, start by visiting us at businessdailypodcast.com.
We all crave something new. At Hertz, new is what we're all about. New adventures, new experiences. When you book with us, you'll be cruising in our newest fleet yet. New features, new tech, and of course, that new car smell. All that wonderful newness, all with no strings attached. So go on, book your new car fling at Hertz.com. Your old car at home never has to know.